Hello everyone. I don't know what happened, but one of my videos actually started to gain a bit of traction, which is kind of cool. Most of my videos have been getting like, I think maximum like 65, 75 views, and for whatever reason, my first video on the E38, I think last I checked, is at like 1700, which is huge for me so far, as it's pretty early on in the channel, but it's pretty cool to see. And I'm almost at 100 subs, which is really, really cool to see that almost 100 people are actually interested in keeping up with my builds and following my journey. So hopefully we can hit 1,000 at some point. I feel like without milestones, you're not gonna get anywhere. So it's super cool to see, and thank you to everyone who's subscribed so far. And if you're new to the channel and you want to subscribe to my adventure, feel free. So in today's video, I'm gonna be working on my daily, which I haven't shed much light on in the channel. Winter's coming along soon, and what I usually do is I pull out the coilovers that I have installed and then switch out to the stock suspension for wintertime, so for a little bit softer of a ride and a little bit more ground clearance as well. Also, where I'm from in Canada, we use salt on our roads, and the salt is just terrible for cars. So that being said, if you run coilovers in the winter and you don't cover them with some sort of either coilover sleeve or whatever else, chances are they're going to get very corroded, and just you're going to lose your adjustability, which is kind of the point of fully adjustable coilovers. This is more or less a stock setup for the E90 platform, or the E9X platform. And what I'm going to do for this season is go to lowering springs for the winter time. The reason being is because the front struts that I'm running are out of a E90 sedan, and what I have here is E91 wagon. So I forget which it is, if it's the strut itself that's different or if the spring is different, but the ride height difference, if you put the sedan front struts in, it actually is higher. So I had an uneven wheel gap. Just to compare here, I've got these lowering springs in the rear. I think it looks like maybe a 1-inch difference. And then the front springs is where there's actually a very large difference. So this is the stock spring on the left, obviously, and the lowering spring on the right. So as far as branding goes on these springs, these are eBay. They're just called red lowering springs. Pretty much the cheapest option. And I'm usually not an advocate for cheaping out on stuff, but considering this is only for winter, I'm not really too concerned. So I'm going to start with setting up this front strut. So getting the spring off, putting the other lowering spring in. And then once we get to the rears, I also have a whole bunch of other new parts to go on the rear. It'll all make sense when I'm putting it together, but a bunch of stuff to basically make the rear end more or less brand new. So let's get at it. So actually changing the spring, it's a really easy process, at least on a traditional McPherson strut. So you get yourself a pair of these, or I mean, in some cases you might even want more than just two. These are just run-of-the-mill spring compressors. They make these in all different styles. This is the, I guess, proper garage way of doing it, or like at-home DIY way of doing it. There's also the not proper way, and that's just putting your impact on the top and sending it and letting the shock pop apart. I've done that before, not gonna lie. This spring is identical to this, and you can see that it is compressed probably 6 inches to fit into there, and that has a lot of power under it once you zip it apart. So that's where the spring compressors come in. These aren't an ideal design for this spring, and I didn't really notice that when I was ordering them. The only complaint I have about these ones is the threads will bottom out before it compresses very much of the spring. Had the threaded portion been a bit higher, I would get probably another 2 inches of threads to be able to clamp this a bit more. Generally, you would want to compress these as evenly as possible, but just because of the design of the coil compressor, spring compressors that I have here, I can't really do that. So it is what it is. Pull this off. So now that you have everything disassembled, it's a good time to see if your shock itself is okay. So for that, you just take your strut top, put it on top, compress the shock, make sure it's not making any funny noises and goes down smoothly, and then it should recover nice and smooth. If it just drops, or it's hard to press down, or it doesn't go down smoothly, you know there's probably an issue. You can also assess to see if there's any leaking right here. These are oil-filled shocks. There's another style, they're gas-filled, not as common, but I'm pretty sure the gas-filled ones don't self-recover like these ones do. So one thing worth noting is just kind of, I guess, pay attention to what it is you have. So now in reverse order, I'll reassemble everything. Just make sure everything stays aligned. Slide that down. And you know it's too tight if you try to turn the top bearing and it's binding, like not moving or not moving smoothly. You know that you've put that on way too tight. It's pretty much good to go, but now that there's no tension on everything, it will allow the shock to spin. After I remove the spring compressors is when everything will be held tighter and I'll be able to finish tightening that down. All right, play, everything's good to go. Something really important, at least on these cars, because it's not a sealed bearing, you want to make sure you have this cap. So I've got the the front of the car jacked up, and so now I've got to fire the wheel off, open the hood so we can get to the upper part of the struts, and proceed to take the struts out. I suggest getting the whole front of the car up if you can. It makes things a lot easier, especially when the sway bar is installed, because once you drop one, the other one being up holds the other one in place, and then it's hard to get the link out afterwards, so it's nice to do them both at the same time. So the easiest way that I find to get these out is to undo the main strut bolt at the back. That clamps the knuckle onto the bottom of the strut. So I'm going to do that first and then let the knuckle drop. Then we can pull the strut from the top. So usually you'd have a sway bar link that will go to here. I was trying to find the reason for a clunking noise that was happening at the front of the car. So I just started removing things, trying to find it. Never pinpointed it for sure, but I have a feeling that this shock in this coilover is dying or dead, and hopefully we can prove that today. There's usually an axle that will go from that cup into the back of the knuckle. And in trying to find the clunks, I removed the front axles as well, because I do have X-delete on this car, so all the power is going to the rear wheels, and during the summertime anyways. And then when there's heavy snowfall and I need it, then I'll engage the front. So the axles were on their way out. I thought those were the culprit of the clunk. Maybe it was one, but not everything. So to make this still drivable without the front axles, I left the front half of the axle in, but I basically just took the shaft out of the middle of the axle and kept the inner cups installed and the splines here to hold the wheel bearing together. So now I've got the bolt out. I got the jack below the ball joint, the bottom of the knuckle, and the reason being is because once the knuckle slides free from the coilover, it's going to drop, and I don't want it to drop super hard and maybe pull on some lines. I have the jack a few inches away, maybe like 2 inches away from the bottom of the knuckle, so that once this breaks free, it'll just fall onto the jack. I also forgot the OEM somewhat of a strut tower bar on the E90s. Mine is an eTorx E14. I've seen some of these as like I think like a 17 or 18 mil actual bolt. Anyways, it's got to come out of the way no matter what it is. Like that. And then now you don't have to pull the whole bar. You can kind of move it around to work around. Once you get to your last one, just make sure you're holding on to the coil. And we got it out. I removed the spring from the coil, and I'm just testing it how I tested the stock shock. So I think I found the culprit of what sounded like a rattling sound. Let's see if we'll pick up on camera. So the shock has a lot of pressure pushing back up, and when it comes back, it's not smooth. I can feel it jittering, so I think this one's blown. As an example here, we'll take this pretty much brand new shock from a different set of coilovers. It goes down nice and smooth and slowly recovers. This one has lots of resistance. Shoots right back up. So the valving, one way or another, is dead on that shock. So here are the stock struts with lowering springs installed in the front. Installation is pretty much reverse of the removal. The only thing that I suggest, so when you're putting the stock strut in, bolt it up at the top first, and then, but loosely, don't tighten it all the way, and then slide it into the knuckle, then jack up from the bottom. If it doesn't start to slide on nicely, you can just take a piece of wood to rest against the shock, keep tapping it with the hammer, and then eventually the knuckle should slide on all the way. If not, you do need to separate it at the back. Just to get an angle on this little slit here, sometimes you need to put something in between here to pry it open to help get the strut on. All right, so let's have a look. Car's back on the ground, and this is what we're dealing with for Fender Gap, which honestly, it's not that bad compared to stock. I think I have a small clip I'll try to throw in here of what it was. Sorry, not compared to stock, compared to with the coilovers. And also too, the springs haven't settled yet, so this might come down a little bit more, but honestly, for winter time, I'm more than happy with that. So now, time for the rears. Okay, so now I gotta do the rear. And what sucks about the rear is most of the interior has to come out. This side and that side. All right, so there's one out. Just has a pin at the bottom here, This bezel needs to come out. The whole bolt didn't need to come out to remove the bracket, but I did by accident. Then there's a pin here and 2 more screws in the upper corner. And that gains us access to the upper nut for the struts. So I lied. The bolt did have to come out to pull this bezel out. Now before we fire the nut off from the upper part of that shock, we're going to pull the wheel off, maybe pull the spring out and the lower nut from the shock. We'll reassess when we get there. Alright, so once you get the large bolt out, that goes right here, and you have the 16 mil out from underneath the shock. And you should be able to relieve the tension on your jack. And everything kind of drop. With the stock spring, this would be a different story. This one, it wouldn't be as loose as this is. It pretty much drops the entire arm, will shoot down, so you just be ready for that. Alright, so the last thing to get the strut out is to pull off the nut from up top. Okay, I've got the BC shock out. So now we're going to prep the lowering springs and shocks to go in. So we've got shock, spring, this is that weird pad shim thing, spring shim that goes there. I replaced all this stuff last season, but grabbed some of the stuff for the upper half. So, got this piece, which goes there, like so. There's also these cups. So these cups have a rubber piece, which goes on the top. And that goes in. It's a little bit different from the BC spring. Let's look at the difference. There we go. Pretty decent difference. So with the BC springs, the adjuster here has a rubber isolator, and this replaces this upper piece here. And then on the bottom, you don't need the isolator. It just goes straight on the lower swing arm, they call it. So this is a bushing that goes at the bottom. So the strut feeds into here and goes like that. And these two pieces here bolt to that lower swing arm. The ones in my car are fried, so we'll take those out and have a look. Well, this is a very, very, very dead version of this bushing. And you'll notice this one has these nuts built in. They're pressed into the inner metal frame of this bushing. And well, I had a hell of a time getting these out. Firstly, they're Torx or e-Torx. Why? Just because BMW, you know. Secondly, the upper nut part just completely came out of here where it lives. And the threads are destroyed now, as well as the heads of both of these. So, kind of at a standstill because it's midnight now. And I can't get new bolts for that until tomorrow. So I guess I'll be back tomorrow to finish this up. So day 2, here we are. Got some stuff, and I should be able to finish everything up now. I was able to finish up the corner I was working on last night, so this is what it looks like when everything is fully situated. So I still have the one rear to do. So here's the bolts from yesterday that completely died. The heads on them got pretty messed up, the threads are pretty ugly. These are the replacements that I ended up getting. So the size of the threads is M10 by 1.5 and 20 millimeters long. And I sourced these, and they just work. They just fit. And I'll show you that in just a few minutes. So the reason these new bolts are a little bit tight is because of the head of them. But luckily, a 17 mil socket just fits between this wall and the head of the bolt. Alright, so everything's back together. It's time to lower it and see what it's like. A little tight in the garage to have a really good look, but let's assess. So yeah, not too bad really. Probably about, I don't know, maybe an inch of gap here. And the front, which might have settled a little bit overnight, is, yeah, about an inch here as well. So at least I'll have not adjustable suspension that I'll have to worry about going bad over wintertime with all the salt and corrosion. It'll give me a chance to rebuild the coilovers, order new shocks and whatever other parts they might need, so they'll effectively be brand new for next season. So that's it for this episode, this video, whatever you want to call it. I know it's not the craziest mod or anything like that, but I wanted to introduce the daily to the channel, and it's something to make content on. I have actually I have a whole bunch of ideas of things to come. Lots of things to do on all of the cars, so if you're new and you want to subscribe, go for it. Like it if you want as well, to help me climb up the YouTube algorithm. And if you're already subscribed and you're already here, thank you.